see how much that helps.
Right, exactly. That would have changed things. So I guess that whole business with the machine brought back memories for me. My dad in our synagogue growing up, he was the guy who, anytime books needed repair, he'd put them in a box and bring them back to our house. And he would repair them, and he'd get matching colored duct tape. He would do the binding, and it would look, obviously it was repaired, but it would look fine. It wasn't so, when I saw that, it's the first thing that came to my mind. So.
I just think that the sanctuary already has enough patina. You don't need to have.
I get it. No, I thought maybe even if those were to come into here or go into the, for kids to use or whatever.
We still need to buy more.
Yeah, we still need more. If those are coming out of the sanctuary, unless we've got the machine here that are in better shape that we can move there, it's not like they're that many. But there's, like you said, patina's a very gracious way. When you walk in, you see the room, it's beautiful. But then when you look at the room, even just the front, and that would have to cost $1,000 or less. Look at the front of the bima. It just needs to be sanded and refinished. It's not a big deal.
Talking about
the podiums. Just, those little things, those can be done for very little bit of money.
You remember Doug, when he was here?
Yeah.
He used to drive me crazy about that. Yeah, because we have very good cameras. And when you zoomed in on me or whoever was dominant, you could see all of the marks and defects.
one does, one doesn't. So to satisfy the one who was concerned, he said they would take him, but they had to tie him up. And had him tied up in the back seat.
That's one way of keeping both sides happy.
No, Elliot's not gonna make it.
Did you row your boat?
It's a no, it is a family thing. I went to Nice ago, they went right after crossover. So we can do that. And the kids were all sleeping in our place.
So I saw an interesting thing this morning attributed to Rashbam,
Yeah.
that Jacob's going back to the other side of the river after moving everyone away prior to the meeting with Esau was because he intended to run away, which I thought was a very interesting take on it, and given his history, is very plausible. And then, of course, the angel comes and takes care of that.
See, you were studying with the commentary of Rashbam on that?
Well, there was Torah study,
Yeah.
which when there's a Torah study, it draws a lot of different things from different places, and one of the things that came up was that.
Hmm.
But I thought it never would have dawned on me. But not tending not to be one who would run away from a fight, I would never think about it. But again, given Jacob's history with his brother,
Hmm.
makes sense.
If his demons had gotten to him?
It's possible.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool.
Why were you looking at why were you looking at that portion on Vairos?
They were looking at this week's, and what this rabbi does is she ties things from various other places to something that occurs in a given week. They all have their own way of doing it, their own style. Micah's sister used to bring in a lot of art
Yeah.
and tie things to art. And that's why it's so fascinating. You just get so many different perspectives. Plus, they wind up doing the same parshas year after year after year after year. So they've got to come up with a new way of keeping it fresh. Talked about prophets who flee their assignments. Moses fought against God not to do his to lead the Jews. Jonah, who
Yeah, it's one interpretation
yeah,
of Moses. But, otherwise, the correct way. No irony. Yeah, right. It is Moses.
plus we're missing the Kansas game.
Hmm?
Plus we're missing the Chiefs game.
Oh, the Chiefs are playing?
Started at 4:30.
I'll be back for third quarter probably.
Yeah, I told Barbara I was doing a Wasserman
LA, yeah. It's fun.
because I could probably get there at halftime and watch the whole first.
I'm doing that for 3 basketball games. Wisconsin game, Texas game, and Syracuse game.
going to go down, and
Compressors.
your action is going to cause the compressor to go on.
Well, yes, yes, it will, inevitably, right? But it's not as direct a connection because, and that's also been solved by Shabbat mode, but that's another, we'll get to that in a second. It's not as direct a connection because when you open the door, there's no delay, right? The light
On the light.
comes on.
The compressor there is.
With the compressor, you need the temperature has to sink below a certain threshold, or rise above a certain threshold before it turns on. And that's going to be very different, for example, if, say you have an empty refrigerator, right? It's just the insulation around it, and it's otherwise it's an empty space, right? You open it,
Why open it if it's empty?
well, it's,
Well, you have one beer.
let's say, okay, there's one beer, yeah. And you take that one beer out, okay? The point being, there aren't all these different jugs and bottles and containers that are chilled to a certain temperature that are radiating cold, right? And that are of themselves going to cool the air as well. So that if you have a full refrigerator and you open it, you take something out and you close the door, you don't know that it's going to come on because the radiant cooling will keep the temperature within a certain range. Now it will come on a little bit sooner than it would have otherwise, but that's far enough off that you can say that we can make the argument that it's a doubtful situation because you don't know when.
Wouldn't you believe that he who makes the eye to see and he who makes the ear to hear is smart enough to know that your action brought it about, even though it's somewhat delayed?
Absolutely, but that's not what it's about.
But what-
No, I mean, that's not what halacha is about,
In
David.
all due respect, it's rabbinical mishagas.
Well, with all due respect, I disagree 100%. It's not about rabbinic, I mean, it is rabbinic mishigas. I mean, it certainly is to some degree, but it's not mishigas in that, so it is mishigas in that it's human, and it's not divine. It's not the same issue as when is it okay to turn off life support for a person, or something of that intense moral weight, right? However, it's the attempt to live with the tradition and the values of the tradition in a way that's livable and enjoyable, not in a way that's onerous or
It just seems that there are so many things that have been created by the people who make the rules to circumvent the rules or to make the rules fit the way we want to live, that it just doesn't feel right.
well, that's a really good, big question to ask. Can we put parentheses around it for just a second? I just want to finish the technical questions first, okay? So, there's the concept of what's called psik resha, meaning if you do something, you know something else is going to happen, right? So, if we have in the bathroom a motion detector light, it doesn't take away the issue for me of the light turning on and off on Shabbat by me entering it, just because I don't flip the switch. I know that my body
is essentially flipping the switch by entering a certain area, right? So that's a good example, I think, of seek Resha. I know that even though I'm not flipping the switch like directly, I know that if I walk into this certain space, this is going to happen.
Let's expand on that for a moment. Because if in fact you walk into that space, but maybe there's a time delay for that light to go on,
Mhm.
would that then change for you? Would that change your feeling?
Well, it's not a feeling, right?
Or your,
I'm trying my best to like represent what halakha kind of teaches. I mean, there's much more there are like complications and details, right? And you're edging into an area that is one where like David is raising. It's one where I get myself a little uncomfortable with the degree to which someone will go technologically to find a way around something. That's also, I think, unnecessary. So what it is it's not like as much a delay, which is a good one way to think as a possibility, because that would make sense, right?
you could go and pee out before that light.
Go on. But, well, as long as you pee on someone else's shoes, it's fine, right? But the other one is if it's indirect enough of a linkage, right? So, this one I don't like at all. Someone came up with a switch where the switch itself doesn't cause the thing to happen, and there's like some level of chance involved.
Sometimes it does something.
But it'll go on at some point within a certain period of time or something like that, which I don't like. I didn't even.
There's also some type of phone in Israel that was created
Yeah.
that instead of, like it's called a Shabbos phone, the idea is that instead of letting the current go through, it actually cuts the current. And I don't know exactly.
It's something, right?
Found some way to solve.
Yeah.
Does it answer the phone? Does it turn on the speakerphone?
Well, so I just wanted to finish the question about the phone, because we're all talking about the watch, right? We were starting with the watch. I just want to come back around. So with an Apple Watch, or any smartwatch, you have a number of things that are going on all the time that it's measuring or that it's assessing, and some of those are based on what you do. So that would be one of the issues that you'd have to really take a look at in terms of would Shabbos mode still count your steps? Would Shabbos mode still keep your, check your blood and your pulse, that kind of stuff? Or it just turn it basically to a stupid watch that just has the time on it? And that's where there's a lot more, because of the intricacy of it, to like really understand what would be possible, what wouldn't be possible. It would take a lot more kind of delving in. But to zoom back out into more David's Mishigas statement.
I apologize for
No, it's okay. I get to use it now, so it's fair trade. You get to rib me, I get to kind of whip you with it. It's fine, right? So Eliezer Berkovitz, have I mentioned him before? So Eliezer Berkovitz was a rabbi, born in Hungary and ordained before the war. In Berlin, he was like a mainline Orthodox, very academically / intellectually talented, writing and all kind, coming up with different interpretations, halachot. That's kind of what really gets you, esteem in that world, the yeshiva world, in the Orthodox yeshiva world. Rescued before the war to England and then to New York, and finally Skokie, Illinois, where he was the head of the Beit Midrash and a rabbi for a number of years. And he has a book, he has a number of books, which you can get, actually you can read them online on Sefaria for free, although the Shalem Center puts them out for like $10, so they're pretty affordable. And he has one book that's really great, which is about halakha. And what he's showing is that, well, he's trying to share his perspective. He is very this is like in the 70s, early 80s, very critical of orthodoxy in at least the authorities at the time, and would be even more so now, I guess. Because the first thing he does, right, is he's demonstrating that when we look at the Talmud, and we have a majority opinion and we have a minority opinion, right? It's like, why do we have both? Why do we preserve both opinions?
All opinions are legitimate.
Because they're all legitimate,
They all should be heard.
so they should all be heard. However, we need one to live by. So what determines which one we live by?
If the authority or if the center of thought that you follow takes the majority opinion, then you follow the majority opinion. If you were to be amongst a group that, it's like Hillel and Shammai. Hillel always won, but there were still people who followed Shammai.
True. Although that was before the Talmud, right?
Understood, but
So-
I'm just using that as an
Yeah. Yeah, so I think, right, so there's multiple opinions, which already tells you one thing, right, which is that there is Torah, there is heavenly Torah, there's godly Torah, that is something divine, but that Torah, it's the physical Torah we have, and the Talmud and everything else is very human, has been impacted significantly by its interactions with human beings, that we have shaped it, we have colored it, you know. It's not perfect. It is from a certain time and from a certain place, always, because of our limitations, right? So we're okay with that so far? Okay. So when we look at the Talmud, and sometimes we do have like a decision that, or you know, a line that seems very clear that that's going to be the dominant line. The Talmud itself, the oral law itself, was for a particular moment in time when the reality of that time said one thing was the right way to go. But 100 years later, 200, 500 years later, the circumstances could very well be different. In which case, the majority opinion should perhaps no longer be the majority opinion. And then the rabbis of the time have the authority to say, things have changed. We go this way now.
But we have that now with the law committee.
Kind of. We kind of do. Right? Because there are a lot of things that we don't go against because of, well, orthodoxy.
Well, what the law committee is talking about when you decide
It does, and it doesn't actually, so it doesn't, right, it doesn't decide. It kind of gives a range of options that then your local rabbi is supposed to interpret. It never gives, like, this is the way. That's not the role of the law committee. The conservative movement rabbis, there are a few things that are absolute, and if you break them, you're out. But there are only like three or four. But that wasn't the law committee, that's the body of the rabbinical assembly making that decision. Like, if you convert someone to Judaism without circumcision or hatafat dam brit, if it's a man, and mikvah for either man and women or woman, you're out. That's one example. Performing an intermarriage would be number two. So there's small, like, very few things, right? Not like the law committee, which is, here's this range of possibilities, and you have to, like, figure out if those apply to you or not. So it's similar but different. And it's also not within all classic halakha.
But is there room for interpretation? Like, a little different. I respect you because I ride past you coming to temple.
Mhm.
And it can be pouring rain, it can be freezing cold. The Shabbat elevator stops and opens, people get in and out. I've said to you, I'll take the bulb out of my car. I'm just passing. I'm not going an extra inch, there's no energy.
Right.
Get in, we'll get here, I'll push you out. And you won't do it. You'll walk in the rain, and I respect that commitment. But I guess it's a very strong choice, which is why I respect it. I don't understand it, but I respect it.
If it's any help, I wouldn't have understood it myself like 40 years ago. But so Berkovitz, right? What he's saying is, in the big picture, right, is that, and this is nothing revolutionary. The reason why we have multiple opinions is because one wins in that moment, but that might change. And in fact, we have two things from the classic halacha, or not even classic halacha, the classic rabbinic texts that would back that up really significantly. For number one is that until Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi in the year 250 actually wrote down the Mishnah, or had the Mishnah written down sometime there or thereafter, sometime in the late part of the 3rd century, until that point, it was considered to be wrong to write down the oral law. Like asur, like forbidden to write it down. Now you see all the volumes of Talmud I have, so or anyone might have, that's not clearly what kept going, but it was considered to be forbidden to write it down, right? That was one. Second thing is the obligation of a rabbi or a judge, a dayan, it's a slight different meaning depending on which community you're in, but let's just go with the rabbi, right? To make the rabbi, the rabbi is supposed to make a decision based on their knowledge and the situation in front of them. Right, the knowledge I have and the situation in front of me. What Rabbi Berkovitz does is he's very critical of not what happened, because it was probably inevitable, but that we haven't done something about it to change it now, which is going to make more sense in a second. What he says is that when is it that we started writing these things down? It's when we went into exile. When the center of the Jewish community left Eretz Israel and was in Babylonia and other places. And so he's very alliterative, poetic in his language. He says, the halacha went into exile. It went into exile in two ways. The first, what was an oral tradition became a literature. And so it got written down. Now that's not talking about the Agadah, like the legends and the stories. It's talking about the legalistic part, the rules and the way of doing things. Got written down. That's number one. And number two is then it became codified. It became a code. And both of those were really restrictive to the halakha's development. Couldn't keep adapting to meet the needs of a society that was changing, right? And he points out that you have then the rabbi making a decision based on their knowledge and not what's in front of them, but what is in front of them in terms of not the person or what's going on, but what are the words on the page? Like, that's the answer. Not who are these people, what's going on, how do I give an answer from what I know? It might be the same answer, but when it's just giving it from a page in a book, it's very restricted. And here he goes very far. He calls those authorities Karaites. Karaites for the halakha. Right? Because in the way that Karaites supposedly were like, just what's written in the Torah, nothing else. They're like, just what's written in the halakha, nothing else. Right? So why is this important? So he says it's important because it's led to the basically Orthodox rabbis, especially, alienating themselves from life as it actually is led and from the real halakha that's a growing and a evolving thing. And for example, right, I can give an example, but I want to make sure that you got what I'm saying so far. Does that make sense? That it restricts it, codifies it, so then it's basically exiled from its origins of being an oral, organic tradition, and that the rabbis who stay within it, in order to stay within it, I think I probably should have made this point more strongly, in order to stay within like the walls of the halakha, alienate themselves from more and more of life in the world. Block it off. Right? So his point being that now we have the state of Israel, now that we have Jewish peoplehood coming together in a much more cohesive way, it means we have a need to bring the halakha out of exile. So, by way of example, we know about the Shemitah year, right? The 7th year, where we're supposed to let the land lie fallow, the remission of debts. Well, yeah, we are, but Hillel saw that if you did that, even in that day, right, when they'd gone a little bit beyond subsistence farming, that you had taxes, you had other things, nobody was going to make loans anymore. So they came up with the Prose Bowl so that you could have a loan that would go longer than 6 years. Because of the reality. In terms of the Shemitah, there are a few rabbis in the land of Israel who basically, we're talking about in the Roman times, would say, you don't have to do it. These people are poor. How can they let the land go fallow for a year and not have an income to support themselves? Or we know the Romans are going to collect taxes. How are we going to pay the taxes if we don't farm and grow the vegetables? So they were saying, listen, what he was showing is that the rabbis in that time were saying, yes, that is in the Torah. Yes, it is a rule. Yes, there's a strong spirit to it, being connected to the land, letting it lie fallow, letting it rest, care for it, right? And what we would have probably done, he's suggesting, is, like if we hadn't gone into exile, is you come up with a way of representing those values in a different way that isn't so onerous to the people. You know, like we know today we have farmers, well, they have a cycle where they'll let one part of their property lie fallow, right, for 1 year, and they will rotate it all around, or something else like that, where they would, kind of figure it out over time. And so what Rabbi Berkovitz is saying is that if we had stayed in the land of Israel, we hadn't been exiled, the rabbis had been able to grow, and tradition had grown organically, right? Then it would have inevitably, through challenges and crises and different technologies, adapted over time to meet the needs of today in a way that looked at the entirety of society, not just this group of people who are going to say they're observing it within these walls. And coming up with fancy kind of rationalizations for why they can do this or why they can't do that, right? And his very strong point for that is, how can you have in Israel a society where the Jews are majority, and you have this group that are saying, oh, you can't do this on Shabbat, you can't do that on Shabbat, right? Without consideration for the whole. And what you have happening is the non-observant Jew being the Shabbos Goy for the observant Jew. And that's not okay. In halacha on any level, right? So he's making that point. He's like, that's not okay. That's a pressure then to figure out how to do it in a way that's holistic. You're not going to say, like, there were protests of Haredim about, for the train, when they were building the train to Jerusalem, about like the drilling or about other things. In a world of international business and technological processes that are so involved and can't just stop for 25 hours and get restarted without having, drastic impacts upon the well-being of a society. If it weren't that you had these rabbis who were trying to live within just their own kind of little place, they would have had to figure out, how can we do this in a way that upholds our values while not impinging upon the society's ability to flourish?
They're having this argument now about serving the army, the ultra-Orthodox. They're putting demands on the army to create
Haredi only, right?
already only brigades or whatever they call it. Because they want to isolate themselves from real society.
Yeah. And that's new, right? So that's only in the past bunch of decades, like the past 5.
That's really the ultimate discussion right now going on in the whole tech world about what artificial intelligence is. Is artificial intelligence going to be able to develop in such a way that it's furthering our understanding of society when computers and technology don't have emotions, don't understand, human needs? And how do you integrate that into something that's just purely logical? Even if you put in algorithms with the best of intent, you don't know what the ramifications
anything. I mean, Shabbos intelligence, I can already see it, right? Like, it knows that I love the Boston Red Sox and, you know, Ted Lasso or some other show. And it knows that I like this temperature range. It knows that I like this light on or that light on, and when I'm in a certain place. And the house is just doing these things automatically.
Well, now you already have, with Alexa, you can pre-program it for Shabbat.
So you can pre-program it. I'm saying you don't even program it, right? It just knows you walk into a space.
Maximize my enjoyment of Shabbat. And then the computer's going to do what it thinks, and it learns itself.
That you'd want.
Start turning things on and off and doing things that might go beyond what you truly were trying to do, and does not
You
fall
say you
within.
learned by itself, you didn't tell it to do it.
Right.
Correct, yeah, yeah.
It does it itself, because it's learning. And
No, it could be, yeah. I don't, like, that's like a crazy, how could we have ever thought about that question already? I don't, nuts. But, so David, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are a number of ways in which halacha is, certainly as practiced within the Orthodox world, it's behind a fence. You know, it lives in a rarefied space. And Rabbi Berkovitz, what I love about using Rabbi Berkovitz is that he's Orthodox himself. So it's not like me, conservative rabbi, saying, oh, look at them across there, right?
lived in Montecito.
Oh, no, he's, yeah.
Let me ask you, I'm a pragmatist, and I think Judaism is the ultimate pragmatic, definitely of all the religions. I mean, I look at it as kashrut, you can interpret it a million ways, but there are a lot of health things that come out of it, mixing certain things and eating certain kind of food. Brit milah, there's a lot of washing your hands, there are a lot of, never playing this. There's so many things that are pragmatic, that we've learned, that we've
So I think that what Rabbi Berkovitz was, one of the things he's saying along the way is that it's hard, if not impossible, for any of us to appreciate what it was like to be a Jew in Europe in the 19th century in terms of how conscribed our world would have been, how many limits would have been placed upon us, and how oppressive the outside world would have been. And that's relatively recent in comparison to history, right? So he, I think, would make the generous assessment that the halakha developed in this way because, forgive me for this oversimplification, but you ever buy, when you have young kids and they get something in the mail or it's delivered, right? And it's this really fun toy, but the kid has more fun playing with the box. I mean, it's like, this always happens, right? And kids, you get stuck in a box, they can create a whole world, And, or like the joke.
There are no instructions to a box.
There are no instructions to a box.
Which is what makes it that much more engaging.
Or the joke about the Jewish guy lost on a desert on an island, and he's finally rescued, right? That's my shul for weekdays and Shabbat. That's for high holidays, and that one I never go into, right? Creating like a whole world in his mind because he's got nothing. He's blocked off from everything else. So to some degree, I think he would say that we were creating a world for ourselves because everything else was blocked off.
Isn't that the seeds of reform?
Hmm?
Isn't what you're describing the seeds from which reform grew? Because the world made it impractical to follow the rigidity. It was an adaptation to be able to be a Jew in practice in a more secular world.
Well, I think there are two sides to it, right? So Berkovitz would bring up, this is part, but the other part is that the halakha is not for just a congregation. It's meant to be for the people. The Torah doesn't talk about, hey, the tribe of Dan has their way and the tribe of Naphtali has their way, right? It's the people. And even in the 19th century in Germany, when you have the beginnings of leaving the ghetto, which doesn't become like reform until 50 years later, or the beginnings of reform. It's just men and women sitting, together, and the sermon is in German or French, right? And there's decorum. Some very just simple things, but that's not in a natural environment of the state of Israel with the Jewish people kind of reassembled. And I think that that's the other side of the coin that's really necessary in a holistic way for the halakha to kind of be organic again. And that's kind of the argument he's making for. So when it comes to chametz, for example, it's interesting what he said, number one, because we sell our chametz. Right? Any chametz in my house, any chametz in my office, whether I know about it or I don't know about it, right? I sell it, so I'm covered there. And then when we do the burning of the chametz, we nullify our ownership of any chametz that might still be there. So no.
It's something we reward.
So that's so that stuff is like a little trippy, but the reason why we are so strict about chametz is because it is not just a zecher, like a remembrance. It is that in the Torah, in a couple weeks, they will tell us, during these 7 days, you shall have no chametz in your dwelling, in your area, among your people. No. Which the rabbis say none. Meaning,
That's not part of the oral Torah.
that's,
Not part of the oral law.
that's Torah.
That's clear and written in the Torah.
Hmm?
That's clear and written.
That's written in the Torah. So that's a hard one to get around.
There's a reality and there's a subjective reality. The reality is what is written in the Torah. The subjective reality is what the interpretations that have been developed, accepted, but they're still subjective.
Yes, in each generation, right? So like Rava,
And each location where it might have to be reconsidered because everyone's environment, habitat, whatever else varies depending on where in the world you might be, where.
right? Exactly.
The idea of the process by which we rid ourselves of chametz is such that we do everything possible to get to 100%. But we know that, we're human and we're going to only get to 99%. And that extra 1% is handled by selling it, because even the night before you burn it, you do a search for the chametz, even if it's polished. The idea of the search is that you search. You've gone to 99.9%.
And you've made a statement nullifying anything that will be found later. So that's the whole point about if you find something during it, I don't think you need to do all of those things. But,
But I just, like I said, I respond to the pragmatism, and
Yeah.
so just to take it, in another, I just got the one I was trying to make, but, there are so many things, for instance, the point I was trying to make was, what have we done? We wanted to get back the law of return. So you take Nutria-Carter. I mean, I know Nutria-Carter, the group Nutria-Carter with the,
Naturi Karta, yeah.
I can't pronounce it.
The crazy, yeah.
Crazy, yeah, but that's what happens. It becomes dogma. Those are the guys that, march, when we go to the marches and they're there with Palestinian flags. They're the guys that hug Ahmadinejad to get the nuclear bomb to destroy Israel.
Yeah.
Because what, it's blasphemous because it has to be vacant and barren before we can return or something?
Because the Mashiach has to come.
Yeah, for the Mashiach to get back there, Israel can't be there, so they gotta wipe them out. So our own, these ultra orthodox guys wanna wipe out Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, as a pragmatist, it's like, we finally got it, 1948, and these guys want to destroy it.
Yeah.
So I always look at the pragmatic, and, just like the violation in the Shabbat, not violation, you're allowed to Havdalah to do a Shabbat. That's the pragmatism I'm talking about. You save a life, so, but when you want to destroy all the lives in Eretz Israel because Mashiach, that's the stuff I can't get my head around.
But I think the real irony is that, yes, we got it back, but we didn't get it back. We got it back as the land, but the people that are there are no longer, you don't have the level of religious affiliation. It's a lot more of a secular population there. Yes, you've got religious Jews there, but there's a very large segment of the population that is secular, who are less religious, and there's that struggle, within the state itself, just to understand what it wants to be and needs to be, and how it satisfies the fact that Israel, our homeland, does exist.
In that it's a democracy, not a theocracy. But those lines are blurrier and blurrier all the time. Like when people talk about, it's so funny, 60 years ago, you were Chiloni or you were Dati. It's like, okay, yes, in the Ashkenazic world, but if you're Persian or Mizrahi, no, it doesn't apply, because that's actually a Western concept. It's a Western concept that you're like, I'm a believer or I'm not a believer. It has nothing to do with, I wouldn't miss a Shabbat with my parents because not, I won't say because I'm Moroccan, but if I come from like a Moroccan family, or if I come from a North African family or whatever, or an Iraqi family, because my mother would kill me if I missed. Doesn't mean I don't necessarily maybe go to the beach Saturday afternoon, right? But what do we call that? Every Friday night with their family, every Shabbat morning at shul, and then they go to the beach in the afternoon. You can say it's just secular. They call it Masorti, right? But we pretended like that didn't even exist, right? Oh no, you're Chiloni or you're Dati, because it's just like the Ashkenormative thing.
Unfortunately, the only time we all really come together is when we're being threatened by the outside world.
Yeah, and that is a huge problem for us. It's always been our problem. And it's also been an issue, which I'm thinking about maybe in terms of for next week, is that the temptation of blocks of the Jewish community to align more with an external political authority than with, they feel that will either share a certain value or a certain power structure that they think will benefit them or the people, right? Versus aligning with the entire Jewish people. And that's been a problem of ours ever since the beginning.
Well, a perfect example is parliamentary procedure, which tries to enable the thoughts of those who believe in the theocracy versus the democracy need to come together, and there's the fragility of any recent or any governmental structure in Israel, because it fractures at any level and it all falls apart. So how do you mix the feelings, the needs of those who believe in the true strict religious concept of what they believe Israel should be versus those who see Israel as a true democracy?
Well, and also you're presuming that it's actually religious and not nationalistic or power structure or whatever, but, Well,
Now that we've solved nothing. Very interesting conversation.
See what you can do when you have a minute?
137.
It is, because there's 3 Davids.
Did you guys write a song?
It's in the Mishnah.
We three Davids.
3 Davids make a million.
There you go.
Sounds like a comedy.
Wrong book again. 37. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haSher bet v'ro ma'ariv aravim v'chacha b'sech sha'arim. El chai v'kayom tamid yimloch lenu leilam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai hama'ariv aravim habas olam b'Yisrael chawahavta. Kim chayenu v'yarech yamenu v'hem nege yamam v'layla v'yavaska al tasir mimenu li'olamim Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Umalchus Sobratzon Kiblo Elehem Moshe V'Nisrael Lachonu Shira V'Simcha Rabba V'Yemru Chulam Mi Chamocha Ba'elim Adonai Mi Kamocha Nedar Ba'Kodesh Norah Sehilo So Seifele Malchus Charovanecha Bokei Am Lefnei Moshe Ze'eli Anu V'Yamru Adonai Yimloch Li Olam Ba'ed B'nei Emar Ki Fara Adonai Es Yaakov V'Golo Mi'ad Chazak Mimenu Baruch Ato Adonai Ga'al Yisrael Hashkivenu Ushmar Tzeisenu Avinu L'chaim L'shalom Me'atavi'at Olam Baruch Ato Adonai Shomer Amo Yisrael La'ad Baruch Anu L'Olam Amen V'Amen Baruch Anu Mitzan Shachin Rishon Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Yimloch Li'olam Va'ed. Ki Malchus Shelcha Hi U'Lamayat Timloch B'Chavod Ki En Lanu Melech Ata Baruch Ato Adonai HaMelech B'Chavod Tamid Yimloch Aleinu Li'olam Va'ed V'Yal Kol Ma'asav.
Here we dive in Amidah quietly, 142, and remember to include the paragraph on 143, which ends Shabbat.
Ose shalom b'mramav huyase shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'yimaru amen. Ose shalom b'mramav huyase shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'yimaru amen. Vahinu Amadonai Eloheinu Eloheinu Masayodenu Kanenu Eloheinu Masayodenu Konenehu Yoshe B'Sesh Eloheinu ויבטחו בקדש שמך כאילו זבת דרשך אדוני חפץ למען צדקתו יגדיל טוב ויאדיר. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל עושה גדולה ליוצר בראשיס שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה שלא שם חלקנו כהם וגורלנו ככל המונם ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. כי המלכות שלך היא למעט תמלוך בכבוד, ככסו בשורשיך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו echad.
So we'll do the Tefillah Bimkom Kaddish, the prayer in place of Mourner's Kaddish. First, though, I'll list our yard sites for this 19th day of Tevet, and then people who would say Kaddish. Otherwise, please, you'll share the name of the person you're saying Kaddish for and the relationship, and then we'll say the prayer together. So we're, as a community, remembering Abraham Sarvin, Eva Kessler, Ira Cooper, Jacob Kornblatt, Janice Katz, Louis Zaretsky, Molly Roth, Risa Hirschler, Robin Adinolfi, Ronald Schwartz, and Tobias Yospin. Otherwise, we'd also be remembering?
Yeah,
And that is your mom? And you were saying Kaddish for?
My father, Aryeh, Gershon, Sarah, my father, Leonard Zor.
And, yeah. And any others? Are we? Okay. So we have this the Tefillah Bimkom Kaddish. Let's join together at the top.
Ribono shel olam, Elohei haruchot l'chol basar, Master of the world, God of the spirit of all flesh, it is revealed and known before you that it is our fervent desire to praise your name and to remember and honor our beloved
father or mother or other relation by reciting the Mourner's Kaddish in the company of a minyan. May my presence here today with my community find favor in your eyes and be accepted and received before you as if we had prayed the Kaddish. May your name, Adonai, be elevated and sanctified everywhere on earth, and may peace reign everywhere. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Le'olam Va'ed. Praise be the name of the one whose glorious sovereignty is forever and ever. Oseh Shalom B'Ramah. Huya Say Shalom. Alinu V'al Kol Yisrael Nimaru.
Amen.
Baruch atah מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן, בורא פרי הגפן, לה 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei vesamim borei minei vesamim la 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei ha'esh borei meorei ha'esh Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lechol ben or lechosher ben Israel amim ben yom hashevi b'sheshet yemei hamaseh Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh lechol Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua Shavua
It
tov.
happens once in a while. Yeah. Sometimes with mom all day, so. Yeah. She's pretty good. She's good. She's non-David.
There you go. Davids, non-Davids. Anybody who wants to be a David.
Right there. All the David. She's trying out also.
It's what makes sense.